we're going to be doing here is walking through a basic demo of the capabilities of rules and the way that they can control the way that your shopper interacts with their survey. So we have a shop here that's been assigned to a shopper, and I've set up some rules on this survey that can highlight the capabilities of rules and give you an idea of some of the things that you can do with rules. So the first thing that I've done is that I have created a section on my survey called Rules Examples, and I've made these black remarks here that explain what the following rule is going to do. I put them all into the Rules Examples section, and I made a rule that said if I check this box, make them all disappear from the survey. I also have some questions that would normally be hidden from the shopper, but we're showing here for demo purposes, and I made another section called Questions Hidden from Shopper, and I made a rule that said if I check this box, hide those questions, and now we see the survey as the shopper would typically see it. So if we uncheck those boxes, you can see what the rule is trying to accomplish, and you can see those questions that would normally be hidden from the shopper. One of the most common things to do on a mystery shopping survey is to collect the time that the mystery shopper entered the location and the time that the shopper exited the location. And typically somebody would have to perform the math on that to determine that the time length was 17 minutes. If we let rules do that, you eliminate the human error of math mistakes. It can also do things such as generate an error to the shopper to let them know if they swap these times and they put the time in as 12:25 and the time out as 12:08. It can generate error messages for them. And it can also do things as complicated as if the shopper enters the location at 11 o'clock at night and leaves at 1 o'clock in the morning, it can calculate out that that is 2 hours if you set up the date and the times correctly. So we have a couple different ways that we can control shopper input. The first way is we have in our example 3 U.S. cities, Boston, Chicago, and Pittsburgh. Boston and Chicago all have professional football, baseball, basketball, and hockey teams. And Pittsburgh does not have a professional basketball team. So if the shopper selects Pittsburgh and the shopper also selects basketball, you can custom write an error message that tells the shopper that those are conflicts and they should not submit those 2 answers combined. The next thing that we can do is we can say if the shopper selects Pittsburgh and the shopper selects basketball, we have a question that's hidden from the shopper but alerts the reviewer that this conflict has been selected. Now in this case, these questions are right next to each other, but in some cases the questions might be quite far apart on the survey. So this solves the problem of the reviewer having to remember that this question was answered this way in question 17, and in question 57 they've answered a conflict. What they can do then is they can check to make sure that the situation is explained in the narrative, that the shopper has backup. This is for those cases where you know that every time this combination of answer options is selected, your client comes back to you and wants to know that you've double checked and that you're really sure. So it's a rare but possible scenario. The other thing that people use this for is for fraud detection, and they will embed an impossible scenario on the survey and then use that to determine if the shopper has answered in this answer combination, there is a good chance that it's possible that they did not actually perform the shop and that they just went and filled in the results randomly. So the last thing that we can do here is if the shopper selects Boston or the shopper selects Chicago, all 4 answer options are shown. If the shopper selects Pittsburgh, the basketball option is removed from the pick list altogether. So this is very useful when you're looking at things like parts of the day. So if the shopper goes in and performs a breakfast scenario, you take away all of the answer options from the food pick list that are not related to breakfast. Or if they've looked at a specific model of phone, say, an iPhone, you take away all of the options that, are Android, Nokia's, Windows phones, so they don't have to sort through the pick list and determine which answer option is the best one. We have some basic inline form branching. So if the shopper is allowed to perform a scenario, inquiring about either a cell phone or a smartphone. If they answered cell phone, we see the cell phone options. If they answer smartphone, we see the smartphone options. A note about this is that the shopper can fill in the answer options about the smartphone, switch back to the cell phone, fill in the answers about the cell phone, and if they toggle back and forth, they will see all of the answer options selected. When they actually submit the survey, we see which answer option is selected, and those are the only answer options that we save. We can do things like optional sections on the survey. So, did you complete the optional return? They say yes, they can fill in the questions about the return. If they say that they didn't, then the questions about the return are removed from the survey. Now, one of the other things that we can do is, instead of relying on shopper input, we can use things such as waves, which are ways to group shops in Sassy by scenario that are not related to time. So in the course of the month, you may have a client who performs 50 lunch shops and 50 dinner shops, and obviously those are going to happen at random times in the month. So what you do is you can use waves to group those shops together so that you can instruct the shopper on the scenario, but then using rules, you can ensure that the shopper sees just the questions about that scenario and hides the questions about the other scenario. So if this shop was assigned to the wave of lunch, it would include the 2 specific lunch questions, as well as all of the other common questions that are asked across all scenarios, like did somebody greet you when you walked in the door? Did you get your menus? Was there silverware on the table? But these 2 specific questions are controlled by the scenario, and those are shown on the shop form. And if it was assigned to the dinner wave, the lunch questions would be hidden altogether, and the dinner questions would be shown on the survey. One of the most powerful uses of tools is that you can combine multiple causes to have multiple effects. So in this survey, the client has decided that if the phone is answered in 3 or less rings, the shopper ultimately receives a quote and they spend less than 5 minutes on the phone, they're going to receive a 5-point bonus on the shop. So in question 7, they answer the number of times that the phone rang. In question 18, they say that they did in fact receive a quote. And in question 42, we have the total time that they spent on the phone. So now we can fill in the bonus score. Now we could do something like a pure section. We could autofill a series of questions. These are all different effects that these causes can have. And you can use this to save time and money on editing and reviewing.